Hello and welcome. I'm Melanie Hayden of the Healing Cocoon, and I will be your host for this interview with my guest, Gail Kastning. Gail is the owner of Purposeful Careers, helping people thrive in an evolving workplace. She is a speaker, a consultant, and a coach. Gail is an entrepreneurial portfolio careerist who streams income through her independent career, her business, and passive income. And she has worked like this in different cities, provinces, and even different countries. Gail has designed new tools for job seekers, career changers, and independent workers. Through her program design, facilitation, and coaching, she gives clients tools to build resiliency, agile thinking, and strategies to find opportunities in tough markets. Just before we get started, I'd like to share a little bit about my background. I've been practicing massage therapy for over 25 years, and my practice has always been focused on whole health wellness and providing my clients with resources to support and maintain their health and well-being far beyond the massage room. I've created and hosted professional conferences, local retreats called the Urban Girlfriends Getaways with speakers on health and wellness, and have over 13 years of experience bringing educators and students together in the virtual classroom as a co-founder of the World Massage Conference. I'm now merging my technical skills and passion for sharing wellness resources by interviewing professionals and experts who have a lot of experience in supporting strong relationships and healthy lifestyles. Welcome, Gail, to the Healing Cocoon video podcast room. I'm really excited today to talk to you about portfolio careers.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Fabulous. So let's start with that. Like, what does it mean, portfolio career? And I know you're going to get into sort of like the new gig economy and side hustles and stuff like that. So tell us about that.
Okay, so portfolio careers are careers built on kind of an income streaming concept. So the idea is that you kind of create a career based on maybe one skill set that you might have, that you move that into multiple income streams. So it could be kind of similar to actually, I think, what you've done in the past, where you're a portfolio careerist, where you've had massage clients, plus you've had your online business, plus you've done, just like what you said, speaking and conference, providing conference support and whatnot. So that's an example of a portfolio careerist who has kind of taken one interest and one set of sort of skill sets and branched out with it to provide multiple income streams.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And do you find that most people, like you said, like I do, and clearly like you do as well, have it kind of in one umbrella of, you know, these are my interests and these are my skills and this is maybe my education, and then, wow, I can do all these different things from there?
That's a really good question, because over the last 5 years, I've been researching portfolio careerists and interviewing them actually for my blog. And I have found that they're like snowflakes in a sense, where no two are the same, and it can really range. Like, for example, just within my own self, I've had income streams where I've worked in a bank, for example, plus I was a server. Simultaneously, I was working as an office administrator, all to make money in the summer to go back to university. So those are very wide range, and, you know, maybe a common thread of helping people sort of, you know, weaving throughout the whole thing, but very different from one another. And even now I have multiple income streams, but they've been set kind of around different skill sets and different interests as well. So anything from, like I said, speaking engagements to consulting to coaching, very, very different from one another, but all under the umbrella of career development. So that umbrella is kind of how things are sort of set up right now for myself. But I've noticed that people are very different in how they sort of set themselves up as income streamers.
Okay, I imagine that some things just kind of fall in our laps.
Yeah.
As like we go along our way and someone says, hey, I need you know, even for me, it's like, I need someone to babysit the dogs, and I need someone to dog walk for me. And I love that, because it does provide you with something different to do.
Mm-hmm.
and maybe not even along the same lines as what you normally do.
Yeah, and that's happened to me as well. I at one time when I was at home with my raising my daughter, I had some contracts where I was working as a career development professional, and then we also had a dog. We started a dog sitting business, and that sort of happened by accident, where we were contracted to breed our lab with, we co-owned our Labrador Retriever, and after we had puppies, people needed the puppies babysat, and so we were babysitting puppies, and people started to say, well, maybe you should, turn this into an actual business. And I kept saying no, no, no. And then my daughter said, well, let's start a pet sitting business, because she was 11 and she didn't want to babysit other people's kids, and so she preferred the idea of babysitting animals. And so then we thought, okay, well, we might as well get paid for this. And then somebody was retiring from it, and they ended up pushing all their clients towards us. So my daughter ended up with a dog sitting business.
Oh, that's fabulous. So
Yeah.
actually that brings up an interesting point, because do you find that people who are sort of go into more of that career portfolio lifestyle, if you will, do you find that they start young by, having these different side jobs? Have you ever kind of looked at that piece of it?
That's also something that I've been thinking about as well over the last few years, because this has come very naturally to me. And so I was thinking that the reason probably why is because I came from a family of portfolio careerists, and they either were entrepreneurial and owned multiple businesses, or they were streaming income from like salaried occupations, or they had a business plus working in salaried jobs too. And so I kind of come by it naturally by watching people do this. But and I think that's the same for my daughter, because already she's 18 years old, and she recently had like two jobs that she was going to be doing prior to the current economic situation that we are now in. She had two streams of income that she was going to be doing. She does some freelance social media work for me, and then she was also going to be doing some audio voice work and videoing work for another company. So she's already learned that income streaming concept. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think one of the things that this does for people like us
Mm-hmm.
is it creates almost an acceptance of who we are as entrepreneurs out there, and people who have diverse interests and who love doing multiple things. Like that
Mm-hmm.
feeds me, and I think it feeds a lot of us. Yet sometimes we're looked at by people who have a career in something, or who have always worked for an organization or a company. They look at like, wow, you're so scattered and you're always all over the place, So I love that this has created a home for those of us that have this, this excitement, and really get fulfilled by doing different things.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's a good point for it, because at one time, our parents went and told us to go and get a real job. So,
Yes.
and that kind of meant climbing the career ladder. And that's never really fit with me. Like, I've climbed the career ladder to a certain degree in my career. And then but I've always had a side hustle. Even when I was climbing the career ladder, I had a side hustle, another income stream coming in. And so it's always made me feel kind of a little bit uneasy to just have that one full-time job and not have, something else that's sort of brewing in the background. And I think that's just the nature of how I want to work. But it's also the idea that if you lose that one income stream, then you don't have anything else. And I grew up with farmers. And so, I know that farmers never really just have that one income stream. They know that if they have a bad crop year, they've got to have other ways of making income. And so that thought process has always sort of been in the back of my mind. And even though the times when I was climbing the career ladder, I always had that in the back of my head.
Right. Well, that makes sense too, because that security, because I think when, certainly my dad went to work for Imperial Oil, he worked there for his entire career, and then he retired with a pension. And
Right.
that really doesn't exist anymore. I don't think it's out there, or it's a very rare thing that's out there. So I think the opportunity for us to have that multiple income stream helping to create security. And
Yeah.
now we're certainly seeing it. So because we're recording this in April 2020, we know that so many people on a global scale have lost jobs, whether that's temporary or permanent.
Right.
So a lot of us are shifting to what can we do now to create
Mhm.
income in the short term, and
Yeah.
take a look at what that might look like in the long term.
Right. And I think what's interesting about the portfolio career mindset with all of this, and the fact that you don't have to be an entrepreneur. So I like to also clear up the misconception that people have to be entrepreneurial to do this, because they don't. In many cases, I've met people who are not entrepreneurial. And for example, I've featured in my blog a woman, her name's Dr. Barb. And so she had her career set up where she was working for multiple employers. So she was working as a youth support worker on one hand with an organization in Calgary, and then on the other hand she was working for 2 universities, and also she was sitting on a board for a mental health committee. So she was actually streaming income from 4 sources where it was a salaried situation. And so and she's not entrepreneurial at all, and according to her. And so she prefers more of the stability of having contracts where she knows that they're probably going to be repeated. And so answering kind of your question too, or your observation, is like in this type of climate, I think it's interesting because when businesses face hardship, or when we see changes in businesses and how they're operating, often that happens after recessions. And so I did a bit of research on that about 4 years ago, where I was researching what happens after recessions. And typically what we notice after recessions is people have to figure out how to go back to work somehow, and businesses have to figure out how to bring people back to work. And so oftentimes they might not do that in a full-time salaried job, because they don't know what tomorrow brings. They don't know what the market's going to look like for them. So they'll bring people back on a contract basis, where you'll start to see like 3-month contracts, 6-month contracts. And we saw that here in Calgary too, after the 2014 recession in the oil and gas industry. And so that's kind of opportunity in a way for people to test drive this income streaming concept, and in a sense kind of be forced into it, whether they want to be or not, and try to figure out, okay, how can I make multiple, how can I maybe even work for multiple employers if that's possible, and get their foot in the door of multiple companies rather than just one company. So you can kind of use this as a career strategy too, even though it might not be long term for a lot of people. It's a really good concept in terms of career strategy. And then for businesses to have that portfolio mindset, where they start to think about, how can I income stream from different directions into my business and make maybe income in a different way. So it kind of works both for the entrepreneur and also for the worker.
Right. Well, that does make a lot of sense. And I love that you talked about how businesses also have to shift, as well as the employees. And
Yeah.
we know that every single financial advisor that we've ever talked to says diversify your portfolio.
Diversify your income.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. So this is that same type of concept. So it's yeah, and like you said, the part-time piece, and I love that, because I appreciate that you mentioned that we don't have to be entrepreneurial to do this.
No.
And that there are so many employers out there who want just part-time employees. And now I think we might even see that more, as you say, as we shift from, once we figure out, when we can kind of all get back to work and life sort of returns to a little bit more of a normal, we know that it's going to be a new normal, We know that this is an opportunity for employers to take a look at, wow, we have almost our entire workforce working at home.
Yeah.
Does this work for our business? How many employees work really well from home, and how many need to come back? And I think it's going to give us all of us a good opportunity to see what we like better and what works better in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And so on the remote work side of this, right, where and that's something that's been shifting over the course of the last 5 years as well, is moving to a more remote workforce. But yeah, you're right. Like now I think we're going to see, you know, who likes working from home and who's going to be ready to run out the door when this is all over.
Yeah. People that thought, oh, I would love to work from home, all of a sudden might go, I do not want to work from home. I love being in the office, and it might. So I think we're going to see some fun and some good shifts there for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah. So can you describe, because we're hearing a lot about like a gig economy and side hustles and stuff. So can you share, like, is that all the same terminology? Is it the same type of thing?
Right. Well, I actually do a course and speaking engagements on that whole idea, because right now we're struggling with coming to kind of a common global language around this. And so I've been studying terminology over the last 5 years and just watching how the gig economy terminology has sort of unfolded. And so the way that I like to explain it to people is that I use gig economy kind of as an umbrella term for on-demand work. And then from there, we can kind of categorize it into different components and different parts. But there is still kind of struggle around figuring out the terminology side. So I use gig economy as the umbrella term for on-demand labor. And then from there, like I said, I kind of categorize things underneath that. So underneath the gig economy umbrella, you'll see the word portfolio careerist, because in some cases, some portfolio careerists are also adding, you know, pieces of on-demand labor to their portfolio, if that makes sense. So it would be sort of like myself with continuous on-demand contracts, but then maybe only having a 1-year contract, maybe also only doing like quick freelance pieces of work as well. And coaching would probably fall into, in a sense, it's kind of like freelance work. So some portfolio careerists do have gig work as part of their portfolio, and then side hustles often are what we see in the side hustle movement is that a side hustle is for people who are working full time. So they have a full time, in many cases, permanent job, and then they add a side hustle component to their full-time job. So that's what a side hustle actually is. Now, a side hustle may be gig work, but it might not be. In some cases, some people have a side hustle where it's a part-time job that they go to, and it's a permanent part-time job, and it's classified as a side hustle because it's in addition to their full-time position. In other cases, it might be on demand, and it might not be. They might be an independent worker, so a contractor. So you see that in the Uber world, or Skip the Dishes, where you have you're an independent worker as you're self-employed, and you're doing this kind of as a side gig. So that could be a side hustle, that it's also a side gig in a sense. And then we have contingent workforce, which is independent workers who are working as self-employed people. So those are the consultants, contractors, and freelancers. So they're classified as independent workers. And in some cases, that is contingent work, and it's on demand. And so that would fall under the umbrella of the gig economy. So it's hard. It's really because we're evolving with the gig economy, and it's kind of a work in progress in terms of the terminology. I'm seeing more cohesiveness in terms of the language of the gig economy, but we still have a ways to go in terms of coming together and having, really understanding the what this means and what the words mean, because I will read articles and quite honestly, it can be very confusing where, you know, one writer uses the gig economy and explains it in one way and another writer is kind of explaining it in a different way. And so, yes, and then you have movement from country to country around this languaging. And so it could have there's cultural implications too in how people have chosen to kind of categorize the words, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And I appreciate that. Yeah, so it does shift again according to who you're talking to. And but that was helpful in it. I think it looks like there is some delineation and some crossover.
Yes, I think that it's the gig economy, if you look at it as an umbrella of on-demand labor and you think about it as being on-demand labor, right away that helps to kind of start the categorization.
Right.
But again, like when you say, okay, portfolio careerists, they're gig workers, not all of them are. Or they might have some streams of income that are gig, but others that are more permanent. And so so there's kind of crossover with it. But then we also have the shared platforms. Like you have the shared ride platforms like Uber, right? And so they were all gig workers and working on demand with as self-employed people. And so that whole industry kind of created the idea and the concept of gig economy. But the gig economy has always existed. Yeah. It's not really anything new. It's something that has been within the workforce for a very long period of time. It's a thing that your parents always told you not to do. They wanted you to go out and get a full-time permanent position where you were going to be there for 30 years, right? So
right.
Yeah.
But again, that doesn't exist anymore. So what are you telling your daughter? She's 18, right?
Well, I think I think it's still very possible to find a career ladder to climb. I think that that's still going to exist in many cases, right. Because from the work from the research that I've done on workforce trends, we definitely have a movement to kind of like an alternative workforce where we have permanent full-time workers, but then we also have maybe a broader, bigger contingent workforce where companies might start moving to that model. So it's called an alternative workforce model, and it allows them to be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more agile because they can dial up or dial down some of their staff. And so that's what I'm seeing happening. So that movement towards on-demand labor is definitely happening in a contingent workforce model, also known as alternative. An alternative workforce model is when you're kind of combining workforce models together. So I do think it's still possible for people to have that full-time permanent position and climb kind of a ladder. But does that mean that they're going to be safe and never get laid off? No. So I think where new ideas like the portfolio career concept come into play is in the fact that we can strategize. We can use income streaming as a way to strategize in between getting laid off or something like that and getting our foot back in the door. So it can be strategy that's used for a lifetime, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is going to become a portfolio careerist or everybody is going to be on a career ladder for the rest of their career. I think what we're going to see is kind of, we're going to need to be a little bit more adaptable and be able to kind of shift and ebb and flow and maybe use a portfolio career for part of our career or times in our career when it's going to be advantageous. Right. And then, hop on a career ladder for a period of time when it's going to be more advantageous to us. Because even with stage of life, I'm noticing that, there's times when it's definitely more beneficial to be in a full-time permanent position with benefits and, not be a portfolio careerist who is, tapping into on-demand labor. So I think that we're just going to have to be a little bit more fluid and strategic with our careers over the next, moving into the next, whatever our new normal is going to be.
Our next phase. Yeah, exactly. So are you seeing then from employers are embracing this workforce? is it both happening at the same time? Or is it employees driving, you know, I really would like to work part-time and stay part-time with home with my kids? Or are you seeing employers going, well, we just need a part-time workforce in this area of our business, for example?
I think it's both. From what I can tell, it's definitely both. So coming in and supporting like small to mid-sized companies that are also quite agile. I had the opportunity to do that this past year. And so I'm seeing a lot of different things where it's both the employer wants to be able to test drive new workforce models so that they can see if they can respond better to customer demands, or and the workforce is also asking for that in some cases. Not everybody, again, it depends on the worker, and it depends on the stage of worker, it depends on where they're at financially too. So I think that we're seeing kind of both, where workers are saying, you know what, I don't want to be locked in for 30 years. You know, I don't really want to have a career where I don't have a lot of choice in how I'm working or what I'm doing. And again, we're seeing employers say, I need to try and do this a bit differently. I think it's harder for large companies that have been operating, you know, for a very long time with the career ladder concept, for them to shift. So I'm not, you know, too confident that they can just suddenly, you know, completely change their workforce habits.
Right.
In, you know, overnight. But definitely with these smaller startup companies that are, you know, trying to create agility and trying to move faster and be able to pivot and respond to customer demands faster because they're small, definitely there's some opportunity with smaller to mid-sized companies, that especially new ones, where they're thinking in a different way. They're using things like virtual assistants that are not even in, you know, the same local region.
Yeah.
That they could, because it's cheaper for them to start up that way. And then after they get to a certain like a certain size, it'll be interesting to see also what happens. Like, do they have to become a little bit more traditional in how they do their workforce, or can they stay as agile as they were in their startup phase? So those are questions that I have now with watching, you know, smaller to mid-sized startup companies.
Great. So what are you hearing from your clients? Because you do a whole lot of different things for your clients. Resume writing, coaching, interview coaching. You provide a really full range of services for someone who's either wanting to change career paths, come into the job market.
Yeah.
So what are you hearing from them now that they need from you?
Right. Actually, that's interesting, because I just finished having some communication with some new clients that I have from last week, and they sound to me like they're wanting some different ideas on how to especially approach work search, and different ideas on how they want to work. And so they're starting to explore different options, like in some cases explore freelance options, thinking about, you know, how can I strategize a little bit differently, especially in the climate that we're currently in, and how can they approach employers differently, how can they have conversations with employers maybe in a new way. And I'm seeing some openness, where in the past, you know, it was I want to find exactly the same job that I had before, and I want it to be full-time permanent. I, you know, not open to anything else. And so now I'm starting to see a little bit more openness and thoughtfulness around what the direction of the work world is kind of going in. And I think that's good, because the work world is changing.
It is. And as you said, I mean, it already was starting to change anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we'll see what's going to happen now. So that's great that, again, that you provide such an array of services for your clients. Can you tell me about your Career Corner Toolkit?
Okay, so yes, Career Corner Toolkit is a monthly, kind of like a monthly injection of career tips that comes to my my community of I guess former clients in many ways. Not all of them are former clients. Some people have just sort of hopped in from my social media accounts and whatnot, or hearing me talk in presentations. So what I try to do with Career Corner Toolkit is give sort of new and different tips that people might not get elsewhere, related to the workforce trends that I study, and just my sometimes a little bit out of the box way of looking at work. And so it's things like resume writing, work search. I keep to some of the traditional topics, but focusing on things like, do you need a resume if you're an independent worker? And if you are a freelancer or consultant or contractor, what is your resume going to look like? So maybe a little bit of a different twist on it. If people are traditional workers, but they want to learn a little bit more about, you know, new workforce trends. 1 month I did a full newsletter on workforce trends. And so the things that we just talked about, like the gig economy, the terminology, being able to talk to an employer or understand an employer when an employer says, can you become an independent worker? Because I only want to hire an independent worker. I'm not hiring an employee. I want to hire an independent worker. And so what does that mean? So really having, just building that knowledge of new workforce trends and language, terminology, how employers are starting to think, how they might be looking for workers. And the reason for that is because my experience in this industry is that work is about connection. So if employers are speaking one language and we're thinking a completely different way, like they're thinking one way, we're thinking another way, there's going to be a disconnect in finding work. And there'll also be a disconnect in our coaching. So this is also for career coaches as well, to help build their knowledge in all of these workforce trends, because I've spent all this time, you know, doing this reading and studying, and it's a good idea for me to now share it, I think. So
Absolutely.
So that's basically what the toolkit is all about, is kind of helping us all sort of move into this new world of work. And, you know, what is that going to look like? So next month is going to be on entrepreneurial mindset, and how and the research that I'm doing right now with just talking a lot to employers, because this is a very sensitive time for them. And so how can my clients connect with employers who are very much in a very sensitive time with their business?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. And again, that's what I love about the work that you do. In particular, you love the research piece. You love knowing what the trends are. You love knowing what the languaging is, and you love supporting your clients to get into something that they can take their skills that they have and transfer them. And so you teach them a lot about how to articulate their transferable skills.
Yes.
You had a story that about someone that you were working with, and the employer wanted them to be I think wanted to get them to incorporate, and the employee was really intimidated by that and almost turned down the job because they thought it was really complex.
Yeah. Yes.
So you so you help support them through that process, just knowing that it really doesn't take a whole lot to get incorporated.
Right. Yes. And that was I had two situations like that, very, very close together quite a while ago, where we were seeing the shift to independent workers here in Calgary. Some of the oil and gas workers, especially the engineers, having to go and get incorporated and GST numbers and whatnot. And I had one client who was looking for a full-time permanent position after getting laid off in the recession in Alberta. And he came to me, and we had just had a work search session about a week before. And so he was actively looking for work. And then he came to me and he said, my former employer called me and wants me to come back as an independent worker, but he had absolutely no idea what that meant. And so, yeah, so we had to explore, what does this mean? Looking at the legal side to this, because he had a contract that he had to read and sign. And then what does it mean to, go and get, open up an incorporated business, get your insurance, get your GST number. And I just have checklists where I help people, help walk them through the process.
Right.
And then they, have to connect with lawyers and that will help them read through the contract and whatnot. So I kind of do the mediation sort of connecting piece and help them get themselves sorted out and set up. And then in that particular case, we also took a look at another income stream for him too, because he was going to be moving, 3-month contract, 6-month contract, 3-month contract. And so what do you do in between contracts?
Right.
Yeah. So he was looking at a portfolio career. But in some cases, I've had clients that have gone into an interview and have been asked that question, had no idea how to answer it because they didn't know what it was. And so, as you said, like the terminology is so important right now for everybody to start wrapping their heads around the new world of work and the terminology.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Gail, is there anything else that you want to add before we go?
No, not really.
Awesome. Well, again, I love your approach to a lot of things, and I think that we just really are on this trajectory. And your background, I think you have a really unique expertise in this area because it's new, but it's not new for you. Like you really picture of this, and you get it from the employer side as well as the employee side because you've worked with both.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So where do we find you? How do we get a hold of you to learn more about your work? If we wanted to work with you in helping us sort of shape where we're going and just getting some more information.
Right. Well, my website is www.purposefulcareers.ca. And if people want to have a conversation, have a free consultation, they can go to my website. There is an inquiry form that they can fill out, and then that just pops straight to my phone. And so within 24 hours, I call people back and we have a free consultation, because I don't want to work with folks if I don't think that I'm a good fit, or if I think somebody else would be a better fit for them. And then also, if they want to hop into Career Corner Toolkit, they can go to my website and there's a form that they can fill out there. That's also how they'll find out about my online courses, because I do have an online school as well. And so typically, that's how people will find out about any of my mini courses. And I will have, I'm working on a free mini course right now on portfolio careers to be launched in March. Just to give people a snippet of what it's like, so that they can, maybe utilize it as a strategy over the next however many months when we start getting ourselves back to our new normal.
Great. Yeah, we need this. And I think just always having an updated resume just makes sense too, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, and learning how to capture skills. That I really love working with people and helping them create the content that they're going to need when they start to look for work again. So that's a lot of fun.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Gail, for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Great information. And we look forward to diving into a little bit more of your online content.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.